With me today, I have Alexis Brignoni, also Briggs, Alex, all the things that you want to call him, and Josh Hickman. Sorry, Joshua, but I call you Josh. Both friends of mine, both people that I respect in this community, both key contributors who are always giving back. And they're going to be talking about healthy Android examinations with you today. So without further ado, you're right on time and you can start.
Thanks, Heather. I'm Josh Hickman. I'm a senior associate with Kroll. And before I got to Kroll, I had 16 years of law enforcement experience dealing with ICAC-related investigations for those of you that do those sort of things.
And my name is Alex Brignoni, like Heather said, and for informational purposes, I'm a special agent with the FBI, and I've been doing forensics for around almost a decade.
And there's our contact information. You can see Alexis is on the left. You can reach him through Twitter, and my Twitter handle is there as well.
Yeah, and today we want to talk about first the concept behind the presentation is timelining in the context of pattern of life recognition, right, or pattern of lifetime activity. And this is a concept that comes from kind of like the intelligence services, where they would look at a target or a person they were trying to figure out what they were doing, and it involved looking at what time they woke up, what they did, their routines, what places they usually go and went to, and also noting when they didn't go to a place they were expecting that person to be at, right? And this concept of gleaning information to come to conclusions based on a pattern of activity is something that now we are implementing in our workflows. And the reason for that is because the technology now captures that information sometimes without us knowing, right? And we're going to discuss a couple of artifacts in Android devices that do precisely that, right? We're going to discuss what information, daily information it records in regards to the user's activity. We're going to discuss then how can we parse that, tools to solve that, and then what information can we glean from that to help solve our cases.
Yeah, digital well-being is going to be the first one that we talk about, and you know, like Alexis said, a lot of the devices are tracking us now, whether we know it or not. And digital well-being is one of those Android features that is on. It's on by default, right? You get your new device, you turn it on, it's going to be tracking what you do in the background. And so, speaking of background, just a little bit about the history behind it. It was introduced by Google in 2018, and it was first seen in Android Pie. And then in 2019, it started rolling out beyond the Pixel and Android One branded devices. Google has a tendency to, you know, kind of tiptoe in the water a little bit when they introduce new things, and then if it catches on, they push everything out. They did an interesting thing in the fall of last year in September. They now require that digital well-being-like features be present on any phone that launches with or upgrades to Android 9 or 10. So we're going to start seeing this in every phone from this point forward until Google decides that they're going to cut it off. Now, this requirement is actually baked into the Google Mobile Services contract. So if handset manufacturers want to use Google services, so you know, Google Play Store, Gmail, and the like, they're going to have digital well-being-like features on their phones. Now, they can opt to use Google's homegrown solution, or they can opt to do their own. And if they do opt to do their own, there's going to be three things they have to keep tabs on: how long the screen was on, how many times the device is unlocked, and how many notifications the device receives through the day. And you'll see that you'll actually get some of this data on a per app basis. So you can tell if you're spending too much time in Twitter or TikTok, right? And hopefully you can make a healthy decision about how much time you're on your phone. And I think that was the aim of Google's. So this is what the user sees. This is a digital well-being dashboard. The screenshot on the left actually comes from a Pixel 3. The one in the middle comes from a OnePlus 7T. And as you can see, they're very similar. These are Google solutions. OnePlus opted to go with Google. Now, the weird looking one on the right, and I know this will come to a shock as people who do the Samsung device examinations, they opted to go their own route. So they've got their own homegrown solution. That does have some forensic implications that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Here you can see this is where digital wellbeing actually sits in the file system. The ability to get to this data is going to be dependent upon the state of the phone. So is the phone rooted or not, or the extraction capabilities of your tools. If your tools can get to this part of the file system, you're going to be able to get to this data. And you can see the name is pretty self-explanatory, android.apps.wellbeing. And on the right, you can see the name of the database, app_usage. The first table that we want to take a look at is events, and this table has a couple of bits of information that we're after, the first being the timestamp. Right, we want to know when things happen, and it's stored in epoch timestamp, easily convertible. The next column, type, right next to timestamp. The codes that you'll see in the type field are usage stat codes. So if you're familiar with usage stats, or you've done forensics on those, and I know Alexis has done a lot of work with usage stats, those codes will actually look very familiar to you. But if you're not familiar, those codes are well documented on the Android developer web pages. So if you need to know what code is what, you can head over there and take a look and see what those codes actually mean. The next column just to the right of type is package ID, and that actually refers to the packages table, which is just a listing of all the apps that are currently on the phone. So a nice SQL query will get this data for you, and don't worry about writing the SQL queries down. If you join us in the Discord channel after the talk, I'm going to post those SQL queries so you can copy them out or write them down. That way you can have them when you leave. As you can see, there's quite a few events that we can track. A couple that are notable is that we can see when devices are unlocked. So the event type 18, which is nice. We can see when a user unlocks their device, right? And the two at the bottom, this is a really nice find that we can now explicitly see when devices are shut down and when they're powered up, and that is a very nice data point to have. Now I've highlighted the notification event type. The reason being is that this is actually not a usage stat. You won't find this on the Android developer page, but event type 12 actually represents a notification. Now, it may be a notification that that we traditionally think of in that I received a message and I got a notification card that came down from the top, or I received a notification that was persistent. It landed in the middle of my screen and I had to dismiss it. That may or may not be the case. You need to corroborate this data point with other data points on the phone to make sure that that is a traditional notification. I do know that Cellbrite Physical Analyzer parses digital wellbeing data now, and I think that they list this event type as a notification interruption, which is a really good way to think about it. This is some output from that SQL query on the Pixel. At the top of the orange box, you can see I have been in a messaging app called Wire. And then towards the bottom of that orange box, the last two lines, as a matter of fact, you can see that the launcher paused and then stopped. And then the first line in that blue box, the Twitter notification, notice the difference in the timestamps. There was a break in the action. The phone actually locked at that point. And I don't remember if it was a manual lock or the screen just timed out, but either way, the phone was locked. And we'll talk about device locks in a few minutes. But you can see I got two notifications, one from Twitter, and then about 4 minutes later, I got one from Gmail. And then just below that in the red box, about a second later, you can see that the launcher resumed and the device was unlocked. I woke my phone, put my passcode in, and I checked my Gmail notification. So you get a really good granular look as what is going on device. This is some sample output from the OnePlus 7T. It looks very familiar just because they are using Google's solution. At the bottom of the blue box, the last two entries, you can see the launcher stopped, and then I've got an explicit shutdown in there. I shut the phone off. And then about 9 minutes later, you can see that the device was started again. About 3/4 of the way down, you can see that the device was unlocked and the launcher resumed. So that represents me turning the phone on, being presented with the pin pad. I put my passcode in, and then I'm back on the home screen. So again, very good granular data on device that you can see from this database. As it turns out, digital wellbeing actually will keep your web history. So the table component underscore events has the timestamp, the type, and the component ID. And the component ID just refers to the components table, which you can see there on the right. Now, the type codes are the same. They're usage stat codes. So you'll see in just a minute the codes that are there. One thing to note about this web history feature, it will only capture top level domains. So if, for example, I go to Ars Technica and I pick an article and I want to read the article, you're not going to see me do that. You're just going to see that I was on Ars Technica, excuse me. You won't see any specific URLs there. Obviously, you can go to different areas on the phone to pick that out, but just know that you're just going to get these top level domains. As before, if you run a SQL query, and again, don't worry about writing this down. We'll have this in the Discord channel for you when we're done. There's only 2 event types that I have observed in this table, just resumed and paused. And when you run it, you can see Chrome, right? And you can see it's a very nice timeline, and it's, you know, resume, pause. Just go down the line, and you know, you can see where a user went. Now, a couple things about this. Now, this feature, the web history feature, is not on by default. A user is going to have to opt into this feature if it is to be captured in digital wellbeing. And if you can look there on the screenshot on the right towards the bottom, it's shaded out, and I've tried to highlight it as best I can. You can see it says show sites. If you were to press that button, you get the splash screen that you see there. The neat thing about this is that if you do opt at a later point to show history, you are going to have Chrome history imported into this into digital wellbeing. So it's not just going to start recording from that point forward. You're going to get previous history as well. Now, I did not get a chance to test this with other web browsers, so I'm not sure if this behavior is the same for you know, Firefox, Opera, Microsoft Edge for Android. So there's some more testing that needs to be done there, but just know that you know, if you don't see any web history, it's just because they may not have opted into this particular feature. Now, as I mentioned before, Samsung, they're doing their own thing. I know that comes to a shock for a lot of people. They have developed their own in-house solution, but funny enough, the name's the same. It's just digital wellbeing. And as you remember before, from the screenshots at the top of the presentation, it looks a little different, but the names are different too. So I'll get back one. So the APK name is different. The database name is different. But a good thing for examiners is that the Samsung has opted to use 7 additional codes that are not seen in the Google solution. So you're going to get more data from a Samsung phone digital wellbeing solution than you would from a Google solution, which is great. But the downside is that you're not going to get as much data potentially. They are strictly adhering to the Google requirement that for handset manufacturers that use their own solution, they can only keep, they have to keep at least 1 week's worth of data. And Samsung is really sticking to that. And then the last thing, obviously down there at the bottom, web history is not an option in the Samsung solution. So you're not going to see any web history in Samsung Digital Wellbeing. Again, it sits in the same file path as before, that data file path. And again, the folder name is different. Samsung Android Forest. I have no idea where that would have come from. And then the database that we're after is over there on the right, the dwbCommon.db. The table names are different too, but they're not so different that you're not going to be able to figure out what's going on. Here we're looking at usage events, and we've got our timestamp again in epoch. The event type is just, again, those are those usage stat codes that you're used to seeing. And all the way on the right is we've got the package ID, which just refers to the found packages table. And just like before, this is just a quick listing of all the apps that are currently on the phone. And as you can see, this SQL query is a little bit more crowded than before, and that's just because we've got more usage codes to deal with. I'll draw your attention to just a couple. The first one being the device lock usage event. Now, one thing to note about this particular event, there's no way to ascertain whether this is a lock that was initiated by the user. In other words, I pressed the power button on my phone, or if it was a lock due to the phone timing out. In other words, the screen timeout threshold was reached and the screen or the phone locked. Now, you could do some quick math to figure this out. You could look and see what the screen timeout settings are, and then look at when this lock event occurs in context, and potentially figure out that I've got a user initiated lock versus one that is done by screen timeout. The other code event type that I'll draw your attention to is the screen interactive. For Samsung, we can actually see when the screen's on. In this case, we can see when the screen is on and able to accept input. So that's nice to see too. If the screen was, if the phone was moved for some odd reason and the screen came on, that would be good information to know. And again, just running a quick SQL query. Here's a snippet of some output here. And you can see in the blue box about 3/4 of the way down, we've got a possible device, the device basically locked. And you can see at the bottom of the blue box, the launcher stopped. So that's good to know that the device locked and it stopped. And then about 3 seconds later, the device was, screen or the launcher rather came on, and the device was unlocked. And then I went into digital well-being, which is all the way down there at the tail of the red block there. Now, there are some limitations about with digital well-being. The first being that the retention time, right? Samsung is really adhering to that 1 week timeline, and but there's nothing documented about how Google's solution is handling it. When does this data start rolling over on itself, or when does it start getting purged from the database? We don't know. If you were to look at my Android 10 image that I released earlier this year, there's 2 weeks worth of data in there, and that actually represents the entire time of data generation for that particular image. So just know that data retention may be an issue for you. The next is users can turn this off, and I'll tell you, if you turn it off, you can see the warning screen that you get there to the right. That 24-hour time frame is spot on, and there is no data in the database once you turn it off. No tables have any data in them at all. But the cool thing about it is you can turn it back on, and you actually get the 10 previous days worth of data. So if you're doing your examination and you're going through your results and you notice that the digital well-being data is a little thin or it's just not there, give some consideration about turning it on. You will get 10 days worth of 10 previous days worth of data, which is better than no data. Now, if the phone's been sitting in evidence for 3 months, waiting for you to get to it, you're not going to get it. It's just going to be the 10 previous calendar days. So keep that in mind. The last drawback is a big one. We're not going to see any data on deleted apps. Once an app is deleted from a phone, any entry about it in the digital well-being database is gone. But there are other places that you can go on the phone to determine about, was there activity in a particular app? We've got our usage stats, and I do want to talk about deleted apps for a second, and in a little bit of time that I've got left. There is a particular feature now with Android called Device Personalization Services, DPS, and it's fairly new, and it is tracking everything that you do, which is great for us from examiners. For regular people, they may not feel the same way, but from an examiner standpoint, this is definitely great news. This is where it sits in the file system, the file path. Google.android.as, which actually stands for Action Services. That's what it was known for, or known as before Android 10. And you can see on the right that is the database that we're after, reflection_GEL_events. This database is very simple. There's only 3 tables in it, and reflection_event is the one that we're after. If you look in the top blue box, you can see with Twitter, Twitter was started, and then Twitter, I went to my Twitter feed to look, and then the last line in that blue box is DM activity. I went to my DMs. So you can actually see what's going on inside the app as it's going on. And this makes sense because DPS is designed to learn your habits and offer contextual recommendations, based on time of day, location, or, app usage sequence. This is where the data is coming from. And so you can get a nice, very good granular level. Now, you're not going to get stuff like device unlocks and, stuff's moved to the background or foreground, or, stop your pause, but you can definitely see what's going on with these apps. Now, if you look a couple of columns to the right, you'll notice there is a proto column, because we are talking about Google and Android. There's some protobuf data here. The blobs in the proto column, they are just a replay of what you're seeing in the other column. So you'll see your timestamp, you'll see your package ID. But the good thing about the protobuf data is that it actually retains data about activity in deleted apps, which is fantastic, right? And so just as an example, that top screenshot I've got highlighted, you can see WhatsApp.conversation. I was in the chat window in WhatsApp. So what I did was I deleted WhatsApp, waited 24 hours, and then pulled the database again. And the bottom screenshot is representing that. And you can see the database entry ID and the timestamp is still there, but I've just got an entry there for deleted app. It's not very helpful. However, if you notice, the protoblob is still there, which is good, because if you run proto-C against it, you can see I'm still able to determine what that entry was, WhatsApp.conversation. And again, the timestamp is there. There's some other ancillary data there as well. Still working on trying to figure out what those data points represent. But the two key takeaways here is that you do still get your timestamp, and you do still get what was going on that device at that particular point in time. Now, there are some limitations to DPS as well. As you can see, the user's got some level of control over deleting the data, including turning DPS off. But unlike digital well-being, if you turn DPS off and then turn it back on, it's just going to start recording from that point. You're not going to get any previous data. The other drawback to this too is that it's only seen on newer devices. So, the Pixel series has got it. The OnePlus series of phones, starting with the 7T, have got it. And the newer Samsung phones, so the Galaxy S20 and all of its variants, and the newer A series that were released this year have got this feature. You may not necessarily see it on older phones, but if you've got a newer phone on your bench, this is an option for you. I did write a blog post about this, and it's way too much information to squeeze in this last minute or two. So I'll refer you to the blog post. You can read more about it. It's really interesting, and I'm hoping it'll show up in more phones as we go on. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis.
Alex, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if anyone else can.
No, it was my fault.
Okay, you're good.
It was my fault. So everybody knows I got my kids, downstairs, and they're a little bit rowdy, so I put the mute on. Yeah, no, I was saying that I think at this point it's pretty obvious how relevant this information is for your cases, right? When you get this visibility into what the user and the apps, the user was doing through the apps, right? So my part is the implementation. Let me see if I can. What am I doing wrong here? So I can. Do I have control? Or you still have control, Josh? If you have control, see if you can. Okay, then go to the right after the mutation. So go back a couple more.
Okay.
There you go. I just gave you control, so you should be able to do that. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. All right, that was me, right? Perfect. All right, so the implementation of the research that Josh just described to you, right? And I did that with a tool that I developed with Jogeshka 3. We're co-authors of A-Leap and the community. And I will take this opportunity to let you know quickly the good work everybody has done in this tool. This tool is for parsing Android artifacts called A-Leap. You see the title right there on the slides. And there's a sister Python series of scripts called iLeap for iOS. And it's a product of Yogesh's work, my work, researchers, testers, a lot of the research that Edward has done, Heather has also done, is been implemented in the tool. And as you can see here, you will see Josh's research also implemented in the tool. And this is the GUI interface. It's also command line, which is pretty useful because you are able to scale and orchestrate parsing these artifacts, right? And I use this a lot when I have, let's say I receive 50 phones. I use ALEAP after I do my imaging as a triage tool, and then I can pinpoint which phone I need to do further or deeper analysis with a heavier set tool, okay? So what you see here on the GUI is you have to select first the type of extraction, as Josh mentioned, to be able to have the visibility into the personalization services and the well-being. It's not gonna work with a Android backup. You need to have actual file system, full file system access or physical access, okay? And the file formats that ALEAP is able to parse is either zip files, an image in a zip file, tar file, or a logical extraction, which is a fancy way of saying, as you know, a folder with all the files in it, in the proper paths from the extraction, okay? And then you select the output folder where you want your results to land. On the left side of the screen, you will see all the artifacts that are supported. You can select them all or deselect them all. Usually leave them all on because parsing is pretty quick, takes 5 minutes. Again, it's a triage concept that this tool has, okay? Oh, I hit it twice, I apologize. So within the interface, you will see there for the well-being, 3 artifacts, the well-being as improper, and then I extracted the well-being URLs. So that way you don't have to fish them from the results from the well-being parsing, right? Which is still there, but if you want only the URLs, you can also just look at that parse from that artifact. And then information about the well-being account, which is tied to the user of the phone, the account of the user of the phone, okay? If you wanna download ALEAP and give it a shot, the link is right there at my GitHub. Again, it's Python 3. All the dependencies you can install using our pip at requirements. If that's kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about, don't worry. In a few slides, I'll have a link that will give you instructions and video instructions how to do all these things, okay? So, we got you. All right, so after the parsing is done, you'll see your report. On the left side, you'll see your artifacts. And on the right side, the different reports from those artifacts. In this case, I did a full run. So you can see their accounts, call logs, Chrome history, a whole bunch of stuff. There's also on the center you see there on the screen, the logs that indicates if there was any issues with any parsing and what type of files were parsed and where they are located, okay? These are the categories that you will look for when you're interested in well-being using this tool. You're gonna go to the well-being category and there you'll see account data, the events and the URL events, and personalization services under app. This is an example of how the well-being report looks. It does the time conversion for you, so it's super, super nice. And also shows the package ID and then the different event types. You will see there on the right side a search bar. So as you type, it will change and give you the results you need. So if you're interested in a particular bundle ID, which we will show you in a second, like Wicker, then you can put Wicker there and it will only show you relevance to Wicker. You can also sort by columns if need be. And at this point, particularly this screen, show you 15 entries, but you can select the show entries drop down and select all, or just use the tabbing pagination, if I'm saying that correctly. Paginated, hopefully I said it right. So you can go through it page by page if you decide to do so. Here's a bit more information, right? You see here like the IMGUR application being worked. Really important. I'm working off the fantastic images that Josh has created for us. He has shared with the community Android and iOS images, and a lot of my recent research, I will say all of my recent research, is coming from analyzing those images. So I highly encourage you to download Josh's images. They're really well documented. So when he says, well, what happened at this time, I was chatting or doing this or that, he has a documentation that says what he was doing at what time, and if it's a chat, what the chat said. So that way, as you're validating your research, you can use that. It's super useful. Again, Josh, I have to thank you I can't thank you enough. All right. Here's the example of Wicker. So if you do a search for Wicker, it only limits that search for Wicker, and then you can really narrow down on the different activity. And you will say, well, Wicker is kind of hard to get to. You know, I might not be able to decode it, and I get that. At the same time, just even knowing when the application was used, at what times, to develop a pattern helps. It will definitely help you. It might just corroborate. Let's say you're working a criminal case. It might just corroborate a witness statement, right? You might not have the content of the Wicker chat, but if the activity matches the patterns that say a witness tells you, that really helps, you know, corroborate that. And I'll give you some examples of how sometimes not having the full chat, but if you have all this ancillary data, helps build that picture. And something that I've heard from Eric Zimmerman a bunch of times is how different artifacts together, they all build this picture, right? They kind of complement each other to actually let us know what's going on. You got to remember that what happens in the digital world is a reflection of the real world, right? And we need to find where that interface lies. You'll see here the URL events, and it's pretty neat. You have there the package name and then the website. It's like Josh was saying, this is the top domains. Also really useful to kind of just be able to browse that real quickly. Here's how the implementation from the usage apps works. Again, it's all included in ALEAP. I should also say that iOS has a similar kind of functionality within screen time. I would say interaction C and knowledge C databases. It's out of scope. I just wanted to mention that because their iLeap also does that type of analysis for you, which is a sister script collection from ALEAP. That and iLeap again it's up for an award, so please vote. Right. Services report. Notice this part is the part that's most interesting to me. After the package name, you can see pretty much good detail of what module was being accessed. If you're chatting, it would say private chat activity, right? If you're at the dashboard, looking at the top level of the app, it will say so, right? It will take research on your part to confirm what the methods are being used, right? But still, even if you don't get the content, you can get that. Something that I did and recently, and I'm gonna go quickly because time is running out. Let me show you this real quickly. Here's an example of deleted apps, as Josh explained, and what the event was for the application. Again, a lot of details. Sometimes we just get an event that the app was deleted. Here, you know, it's deleted, but you actually figure out what it was doing at that particular time. Now, the thing I want to get to first is the contributor list. Here's all the people that have helped. Go check this page. And then if you're not following these people on Twitter, you need to follow these people on Twitter. They do great research. They do great sharing. Some of them you know, some of them you don't. Please do follow them. And if you want to understand how ALEAP works, how to install it, how to run it, or even how to develop artifacts for it, you can go to this resource page in my blog, and it will show you that. And you can reach out to me as well. One thing that I did not have on my slides because I came up with it before the time to turn our slides in. Timelining. I thank Sarah Edwards. She was the inspiration for it, and her Apollo tool. It's super, and this is the last thing, it's super important because the timelining really puts context from other artifacts. For example, and I don't have I cannot show you, but I'll quickly describe it. You can have Wellbeing telling you, well, an activity was paused or an activity was resumed, right? Usage stats at that same time, maybe a second right after, tells you that that app was moved to the background, right? So you know the activity paused. Now you know by combining it with usage stats that is because it was moved to the background, right? And then it tells you then therefore the activity was stopped, right? And then usage stats tell you, well, you know, the screen was not interactive at that point, right? So you start building more detail when you combine Wellbeing, Personalization Services, and usage stats. Sometimes the events are mirrored to each other in a sense, but sometimes it just provides more context to exactly what was happening with the app. This is the tool creates a SQLite database with all the timelining from all the artifacts that have a timestamp on them. So please do check that out. It will be at the root of the script folder. And that's all we got. Again, this is our how you can reach out to us in regards to the implementation. If you have something that you want me to look at, or make a parser for, or help you out in a parser you're working on, feel free to reach out to me and reach out to Josh, and we'll be glad to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I can hear you, Heather. I don't know if
We
it's
can't hear you, Heather.
It's because I muted myself. You seriously finished on perfect time. What I tried to do while you were talking, I pinned your images, Josh. I pinned your blog that you wrote.
Okay.
I pinned
Cool.
Barack's blog on Celebrate, and I pinned A-Leap, and I pinned the Forecast Awards. So I tried to pin all the things as you were mentioning it to track to and your channel. I also pinned some questions that were asked in there. So you may want to take a look. There was a really good one. I forget which channel it was in, but it was about the type of acquisition that you need in order to get digital well-being.
Right. So you're going to at least need to get a file system, some type of the file system acquisition. And I tested this both on UFED and Axiom. But again, it just depends on the extraction capabilities of your tools. And as we know, Android phones pose a particular problem because of how different handset manufacturers implement Android, right? The different software and hardware combinations, it makes it quite a bit of a headache as far as trying to figure out if a particular tool can extract from this particular device. But at least the file system.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. And I didn't want to chime in and answer all the things, but that was a good one. I thought it would be nice to hear. And you were answering things on the fly as people were typing it. It's hilarious. It's like you were reading the chat channel. It was amazing.
I tried to anticipate what kind of questions I would have from an examiner standpoint, and it made sure that those got in there.